Hello everyone, my name is Richard Droste and I am presenting Unified Image and Video Saliency Modeling on behalf of my co-authors Jianbo Jiao and Alison Noble. When humans process visual inputs, they naturally fixate the most important information. Predicting the distribution of fixations is called visual saliency modeling. This is useful for applications like image compression, action recognition, captioning, visual question answering, and many more. Prior work has focused on predicting saliency for images or for videos. Here, we propose the first unified saliency model that predicts saliency for both modalities. Further, we show that this results in better overall performance and a simpler, smaller, and faster model with one set of parameters for all inputs. Let's have a look why joint modeling of video and image data might be challenging. Consider, for example, this scene of a snowy mountain. A static image saliency model will predict fixations on the trees and in the distance. However, the scene is from a video clip, and humans fixate the snowboarder that is occluded in the example scene. This can only be predicted by a dynamic model, which has spatio-temporal features. On the other hand, consider this scene. The static model predicts the highest fixation probability for the text that informs us about the destination of the bus. This is in accordance with the ground truth, since this is an image that is viewed for several seconds by the human subject. The dynamic model, in contrast, assigns the highest probability to the people entering the bus, which is where the action would be happening if this were a video. These examples indicate that humans view the same scene differently, depending on whether it's an image or a video. Therefore, a unified model needs a way to represent these differences. Before I explain our unified model, let me describe the datasets that we consider. Silicon is a large image saliency dataset that is based on Microsoft COCO and therefore features everyday scenes with common objects. The human fixations for each image are recorded during 5 seconds of free viewing. DHF1K is a large video saliency dataset with diverse content that is sourced from YouTube. The fixations are recorded while the subjects freely view the videos. For Hollywood 2, in contrast, which contains scenes from movies and television, the videos are labeled with actions, and some of the viewers were instructed to identify the action label. The same applies for UCF Sports, which contains scenes from sports broadcast. In addition, we used the MIT 1003 and MIT 300 datasets for evaluation. Now, we approach unified modeling via domain adaptation. Through a series of experiments, we identify covariate shift, spatial bias, feature importance, and saliency map smoothness as the main sources of domain shift between image and video saliency datasets. Consequently, we propose corresponding domain adaptation modules that enable joint modeling. I will explain these on the next slides. The first domain adaptation module addresses the covariate shift between the datasets, or in other words, the shift in network activations between datasets. To illustrate the shift, we construct a simple preliminary experiment. We compute the average pool output features of a MobileNet V2 model for randomly selected images or video frames. Next, we visualize the feature space through TSNE after normalizing the features to zero mean and unit variance. This is the result when normalizing the features across all datasets. In contrast, this is the result when normalizing across the features of each dataset separately. We can observe that first there is a visible domain shift and that it is resolved through the per dataset normalization. Therefore, we use domain adaptive batch normalization, which means a separate set of batch norm statistics and parameters for each dataset. Next, we address the domain shift related to spatial bias. Here we plot the average ground truth saliency maps for each dataset. In general, the center is fixated most frequently, which is known as visual saliency which is known as center bias in visual saliency research. In addition, we can observe that the center bias is much stronger for the video saliency datasets compared to Salicon. Consider this DHF1K video frame and Salicon image. Both show birds, but for the video frame, all fixations are at one location near the center. For the image, in contrast, different birds across the image are fixated. To model these differences, we introduce domain-adaptive priors, which are Gaussian prior maps with a separate set of parameters for each dataset. In particular, the Gaussian prior maps are bivariate Gaussians, which are constructed from means and standard deviations that are learned during training. The parameters are initialized to cover a broad spectrum of possible priors. Next, we address the domain shift caused by different feature importances. To study this, we construct a simplified saliency predictor from a MobileNet v2 encoder, a domain-invariant fusion, which is a weighted sum of the MobileNet feature maps, and finally a simple bilinear upsampling. We initialize the MobileNet with ImageNet weights and train the fusion layer until convergence, which results in the per dataset validation losses as shown. Now, if we make the fusion layer domain adaptive, which means different weights for each dataset, then the validation loss is significantly decreased. This indicates that the importance of each MobileNet output feature map varies between the datasets. Therefore, we introduce domain adaptive fusion into our framework. Finally, we examine the domain shift caused by saliency map smoothness. Here we can see exemplary saliency maps from each dataset. Each of these is computed by smoothing a binary fixation map with a fixed-size Gaussian kernel. It is apparent that the saliency maps have different smoothnesses when resized to the same width. This can be quantified by computing the maximum gradient magnitude for each image and plotting the histogram for each dataset, which confirms the initial observation. Consequently, we introduce a separate learned smoothing kernel for each dataset, which we refer to as domain-adaptive smoothing. We design a simple encoder-decoder model in which we integrate the proposed domain adaptation modules. In particular, the domain-adaptive priors are concatenated with the feature maps at the bottleneck, and the decoder output is passed through domain-adaptive fusion and smoothing. Domain-adaptive batch normalization is implemented throughout the decoder. In addition, temporal features are extracted from the videos through a residual RNN that is automatically switched on for video inputs, which we refer to as bypass RNN. With one set of parameters, we achieve state-of-the-art performance in all tested video saliency datasets and competitive performance for image saliency modeling, in addition to faster runtime and a 5 to 20-fold reduction of model size. Here we show the results for the DHF1K video saliency and Salicon image saliency benchmarks. The x-axis shows the AUCJ performance metric, and the y-axis the logarithmic model size, with smaller sizes further up. Also, for DHF1K, model runtime information was available for the compared models, which is indicated by the circle size. Static models are shown in orange and dynamic models in blue, and our unified UNISAL model in pink. Here are the results for the Hollywood 2 and UCF Sports video saliency benchmarks. Please refer to the paper for more quantitative and qualitative results and ablation studies. Thank you for watching, and feel free to check out the provided paper and code.